Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Royal Blue podcast to mark the 40th anniversary of what I only need to refer to as the Bayern Munich game. I've learnt a lot about this pivotal fixture in the decades since, but I was only 5 years old at the time, and I must admit, I don't remember the game. It predates my football consciousness. But two gents who are a little older than myself are already in the fullness of manhood by this point. You can hopefully recall vividly what they saw that night. I'm joined by our regular contributor, Gavin Buckland, Everton's official statistician, and Everton FC PR manager, and of course my former Echo boss, Everton correspondent, later head of sport, Dave Prentice. How are you both?
A little bit concerned that it was that long ago. Yeah. Years, but I'm fine fettle otherwise.
Yeah, well, I was in the full flush of manhood, and 85 is open to question. People who knew me at the time, but no, I was, certainly remember it very well.
Yeah. I'll start over. Neville Southall, who's the best keeper in the world at the peak of his powers, obviously in 84-85, became the last goalkeeper to be voted Football Writers Association Footballer of the Year that season. And of course, Everton's most decorated player, the man who's played more matches for the Blues than anyone else. He remarked in his autobiography, The Bin Man Chronicles, the greatest game of the 1984-85 season, indeed possibly the greatest game in the history of Everton Football Club, came at Goodison in the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup on 24th of April 1985. He added, "I loved playing under the Goodison floodlights, but this was different. This was truly something else. The crowd never normally affected me in any way, but on that night, the only time in my life, they acted as the 12th man. We could see how much it meant to everyone there, and we wanted to win for them." We'll start with you, Dave. I mean, do you just think of what Nev says there? Do you concur with the big man?
100%. I mean, every single player that was involved in that game has spoken so passionately of it. I think Andy Gray said if there was one game he could take to his grave, it would be that one.
Yeah.
Everybody else that was involved in it, believes the same. And it's weird, actually. I mean, Gav will no doubt back me up here, but at the time, you didn't really think of it as being anything different or anything special because there were so many special moments in that season. But looking back on it with the benefit of hindsight, it is undoubtedly the greatest atmosphere I've witnessed at Goodison. And, despite my advancing years, as you very diplomatically refer to, so I go back to 1975, and since then there's been absolutely nothing before or since. And I include the Wimbledon game, the games against Crystal Palace and against Bournemouth. They were great atmospheres. But that night, funny enough, the game on Saturday against Man City, they were running the highlights of it on the big screen before the game. And I'm just looking at the terracing, because as we'll go on to later, I was in the top balcony of that game for the first and only time. But the terracing was just absolutely bouncing all the way through. It was astonishing. The noise, the partisanship, the intensity. I've not witnessed anything before or since then. So yes, long-winded answer, it was exactly as Neville said.
Yeah, I don't know how much they could hear from Dave up there in the top balcony. What about yourself, Gav? Were you contributing to that?
Yeah, well, I was in the Gwladys Street to my normal spec. I can totally agree with Preno. It's an interesting point because I've heard Dave talk about this game before, and I was talking to you on Saturday about it, that it's now a gigantic Goodison moment, isn't it? Yeah. In that, the Bayern Munich game. But at the time, it was celebrated, but because of the way that the season going to a climax, there was just a game after important game. Yeah. So already that was April 85. Already that month we played at Spurs in one of the most important league games Everton had ever played. And personally speaking, the best game I've ever been to, beats Bayern Munich, the Spurs game. Then you'd had the famous Sunderland 4-1. Yes. You'd had the FA Cup semi-final against Luton. You'd had Bayern away. Mm-hmm. And that was just in April.
Well, it's a mad one for you. 4 days before we played Bayern Munich, we went to Stoke City, and we were like closing in on the league title then. Stoke's average attendance that season was 6,500. Their previous attendance was 6,000. Previous before that was Arsenal, got 7,000. There were 18,500 at the Victoria Ground that day. I was one of them.
I was there,
and it was like over 10,000 Evertonians. And it was just a ridiculous atmosphere. But everything was building to a crescendo that season. That was just part of it. That was just like the build-up to the Bayern game.
It wasn't sort of forgotten about, because obviously the next day it was great and you enjoyed it, like you're looking forward to the final. But yeah, it's over time. It's developed its own momentum, hasn't it? Really,
because we won the cup eventually.
Yeah, because we won the cup.
We didn't know we were going
also,
to
we've not had the moments.
Yeah.
Dare I say, to match. We've had some great nights under the lights of Goodison.
Yeah.
One other one on the 24th of April, which was the last season.
Yeah.
So there's been other. It's just that it's frozen in time, isn't it? Because we've not repeated it for a number of reasons. I think it helps, and it doesn't happen in European games now. And in some respects, it sort of lost something in the fact that it was just Everton fans there. I think there was 300 Bayern fans. So you had the Park end, which is normally at the time away supporters. That was all Everton as well. So it just made it even more of a, rather than three quarters of a beer pit, it was 100% a beer pit. Yeah. And I think that's what happened in European games then. Yeah. And that's been lost now, hasn't it, really, man? But the atmosphere of European matches now are great, aren't they? Lots of travelling fans. So it made it just about Everton. Yeah. And I think that's the difference between games, other games, even that season or since, was just Everton fans there. So it was memorable for that reason.
Just before we delve too deep, and I don't want to get stuck too far down a rabbit hole with this one, but Dave, obviously what Neville has referenced possibly the greatest game in the history of Everton Club. Now, I say in my forthcoming book, Spirit of the Blues, out this summer, you'd struggle to find
moments,
an Evertonian who would deny it was the greatest night in Goodison Park's 133 history. Pretty unanimous verdict. And I used the word night, Dave, because Dixie Dean's 60th in 1928 against Arsenal must be up there. Any other serious candidates? Borussia Mönchengladbach? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that was historic for different reasons. It was the first time a penalty shootout had ever been used in the European Cup, and obviously it happened at Goodison Park. Looking at Everton's history from a dispassionate viewpoint, which is difficult, I would always go for Dixie Dean's record as being the greatest moments, because it set a record which is still unmatched nearly a century later. It's still spoken about later. Maybe 100 years from now, so that Bayern Munich night will still be being talked about. Hopefully not as in the same way, because hopefully we'll have won another European trophy between now and then. You just don't know, do you? But yeah, certainly the greatest night. I think it probably tops Borussia Mönchengladbach, even though I wasn't there that night, so I can't speak with any degree of historical perspective. I don't know if Gavin, were you in the
I just missed
of youth?
I missed the Mönchengladbach game by a few months, but I think I mean the Dixie Dean thing was a moment, wasn't it? The actual game itself, I know people were champions, was inconsequential, I suppose, in that the results, it was only a 3-3 draw, wasn't it? I think as a self-contained game, I think I'd have to put the Bayern Munich game, but it's not just that, is it? It's, and I remember writing about this once, is just a plug, stuff. Is it captured a lot of the symbols we like about Everton, didn't it? It was Goodison under lights. It was number 9, at the Gwladys Street end.
And there's so much folklore attached to it. Howard Kendall's halftime
talk. And the Celtic influence coming from behind, the as you say, Howard, the Gwladys Street will suck the ball in, and that it captures a lot of the essence of Everton, those symbols that we worship, And there's a funny point that we make once made about the Howard Kendall thing, the half-time score. I said, what if they'd got beat? And they asked the players afterwards, what did Howard say to you that time? He said, didn't say nothing to us. The Gwladys Street sucked the ball into that. We wanted a bit more than that. It's funny how these things can be switched, but thankfully that didn't happen. I'm sure Howard said other stuff. But I always think it captures a lot of the stuff and the symbolism within the club that we worship, for want of a better phrase, and also as well within that, as a fan. There was still that England-Germany rivalry at the time, but not just in football, as we know, and it was also that element to it as well, which was hugely symbolic. So the Bayern game definitely, but for not just because it was European Cup Winners' Cup semi-final, it captured a lot of the stuff around the club that we hold dear, I think.
Yeah, well, we've mentioned the atmosphere already, and everyone always mentions this, so we're going to go to a first of our clips that we've had from former players speaking on the Goodison Park My Home series, and this is Derek Mountfield recalling the build-up to the game.
Nowadays, it would probably finish 7-aside. There was some brutal tackles in it. I mean, seriously, nasty tackles and elbows flying around. But you come to Goodison Park,
Yeah.
It's a semi-final of a European trophy. You're not going to get an easy night.
No.
Full stop. I remember we always stayed in town at the old St. George's Hotel, which is now the Holiday Inn.
Okay.
And we normally left round about, those days it was always a 7:30 kickoff. So I'd always be told to be down for reception for like 6:10 on the coach, 7:15, be at Goodison for 6:30. Yeah. Howard wanted us there an hour beforehand. Get a phone call, we've got to go early. Yeah. Why? There's thousands outside the ground, we've been told. Yeah. We left a good half an hour early. And I remember turning left into Gwladys Street and you couldn't see the road. It was just a swarm of people. Yeah. And the bus is trying to get down. And how Moses felt when he parted the waves. There was Everton fans getting squashed against the houses one side and the street end the other side, all still singing and chanting. And we go into the game and we came out. The roar was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a nip and tuck game. We had. Tackles were flying in and then they scored. And someone turned their volume off. Yeah. It was stony silent. Yeah. So we come in at half time and I goes, boys, you're better than them. You're fitter, you're stronger, you're a better team. That street end, get the ball in the box, let them suck it in, and we'll score. Yeah. We didn't use Gavin Stevens' long throws every single game, but Gary gets it, launches it. Andy Gray sort of let's say he has an incident with the centre-half Argentala. Happened to be nose and elbow in the same sentence, I think. And
coming together.
Coming together. Yeah. Sharpie scores. Yeah. They're looking for a free kick. Argentala's looking for a sponge for his nose. We're back in the game. The crowd erupt. And then a few minutes later, same again. This time it's Sharpie. And the keeper comes and flaps like mad. Yeah. Drops to Andy. It's 2-1. And the crowd were really up for it. The noise was brilliant. Great atmosphere. It wasn't the best game. It was a brutal game. Yeah. And then we get the third. And, Sheedy takes his time. Andy, good ball. Trevor, who was so comfortable with that going through against the keeper, so comfortable. 3-1, and it was just bedlam in the crowd. We're thinking, wow, European. We've only just come together. This our first ever trip to Europe for most of us, and we made a final. But the atmosphere that night was. I remember there's a quote in Goodison that when we came out at half time, the roar made my neck hair stand up. I was shivering and it frightened me. What I did to the Bayern players, I don't know. But it put that roar at half-time put the fear of God in me.
And they're behind you, yeah.
It was for us, not for them. But the roar was brilliant. And I look back to that night and think, I haven't really watched the game since. I'll have to get a video of it and watch it. But the atmosphere was fabulous. The game was rough, brutal, but we got the right result.
The right result. Dave, as I said, we're talking in hindsight now, but do you recall those scenes beforehand? You said you obviously the only time you've been in the top balcony.
No, I don't, to be honest. I mean, just trying to think back as to. I know we went to the Mons for a pint before the game, which was unusual. It's not called the Mons now, is it? It's called something else. But that was out of the ordinary. I don't know why we ended up there. But I remember why I was in the top balcony because you couldn't get a ticket. I mean, that was in the times when. Some of the games were all ticketed. Bizarrely, the QPR title decider wasn't. And I very nearly got locked out of that. That's a different story. Did manage to get in the end. But no, Bayern Munich, we couldn't get tickets for the game. And ultimately, mate Chris said, he's able to get tickets via his dad, who was some kind of high-ranking official at Plessis. And that was like a double-edged sword. It was like, great, okay, we got tickets for the game. But equally, I'm going to have to sit and watch it with, Chris's posh dad. And I'm thinking, so are we going to be able to, control ourselves? And we didn't need to because, literally the match kicked off. And, Chris, I won't use the exact phraseology that he used, but he jumped up and used some fairly xenophobic language about the Germans. And we just thought, we're going to be okay here. Yeah. So we did. It was just like an incredible atmosphere. And we were on the top balcony looking down on it. And it's funny you're talking about the silence when Bayern scored, because I remember that so clearly. Because I remember Ludwig Kogel, who was very, very quick winger, broke the offside trap and was bearing down on goal. And I just knew Neville was going to save it. I just knew. It was one of those things where you had absolute confidence in him because he'd been so good that season. And sure enough, he made himself big, and he did, so he actually parried the ball, but it span loose. And if you look at the way the ball spins as well, it span into Dieter Honus's path, and it was like the most unlucky bounce you could have had. Yeah. He rolled it in, and it was like Derek said there, puncturing like a balloon. It just went absolutely silent. For a second or two, and then there was this incredibly defiant roar. But I always remember at half time talking to John Coyle, who was sat next to me. What he said to me, what do you think? And I was like, oh, it's going to be tough, isn't it? Because both of us thought that we're going to have to score 2 goals against like this defence that's got Argentile in it, a team that's got Lothar Matthäus. Pfaff was a great goalkeeper then. It was very, very tough. And it was second half was just astonishing roller coaster ride. So yeah, I wouldn't say we had absolute confidence we were going to do it, but we did.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. It's all hindsight, this, isn't it? Like you think, oh yeah, because the team, like we knew we'd do it. Well, actually, there was still doubts because you hadn't won anything that season at that point. There was, as Penno said, Bayern had a few top players. You know, they probably had the team had been 10 years before, but Matthäus is one of the best midfield players in history, isn't he? Yeah. You know, Argentile, Pfaff was a bit erratic, but he was still a very good goalkeeper. And
they'd beaten Roma in the quarter-final.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mentioned before that there was a really, worth pointing out here, there was a really, really strong field for the Cup Winners' Cup that year. Yeah. If you have a look at the European Cup finals played between 84 and 87, I think there were 7 teams involved in those 4 finals. 5 of them were in the Cup Winners' Cup that season. Star Bucharest were in it. But Teddy Venables Barcelona were in it, which people forget about. They got knocked out in the first round. Porto were winning. So it was a top quality field. You had Celtic in it as well, didn't you? So it wasn't as if like Bayern Munich was the only threat to us that year. It was just the fact that the way it felt that other teams had been knocked out, and I think they were a very decent team. And going back to the original point, it's all hindsight. This at half time, we thought 2 goals here, it's going to be tough because we'd had a couple of opportunities in the first half, but we'd not really threatened. The one good opportunity was very early on, strange enough, where the ball's played up to the far post and Trevor came in about the edge of the 6-yard box, but at an angle, and technically as good as anybody, Trevor, and he snapped at his shot and it went across the goal. And he admitted himself, I think, to you, Chris, he didn't have a great evening, Trevor. And I think whether that missing that goal sort of dampened his confidence a little bit, because young lad, like 21. Yeah. And so, it wasn't as if, we'll do these at half time. So, this is going to be tough. And though they'd lost a few games to English clubs and British clubs in the years before, and they're still Bayern Munich, aren't they? Yeah. And there was doubts at half time, certainly. Yeah, but I know he's actually watching the footage back. I know Dave hasn't watched the footage back. He wants to keep his memories for but you and I both watched it back. And remember, Howard Kendall's actually sat with was John Moores at the start of the game up in the director's box. And obviously he moves. He's then about half an hour in. You can see he's down in the dugout there. But interesting what we've said there about the noise and the silence after the goal. Just want to listen to what Kevin Sheedy has to say about this and the way that Everton came back into the contest.
Yeah, it was the whole night, sort of getting around the back of the Gwladys Street on the coach to get to the main reception. You couldn't move. It was just packed. Coming out for the warm-up, you could just feel the atmosphere was electric. And then coming out for the actual game, you hit the top step and you come out to Goodison, and there was I'd never played in an atmosphere like that. Yeah. It was one of those where we can't get beat. There's about 50,000 Evertonians there, and we always used to give Ratcliffe, the captain, if he won the toss, we'd always kick to the park end first and then go to the Gwladys Street second half. And luckily enough, we were kicking to the park end first half. Yeah. They scored just on half time, just a lucky goal, and you could just hear a pin drop and then go coming out for the second half. But Howard, he was never a rant or a raver. He made a couple of points at half time and he said, just get at them. The Gwladys Street will suck the goals in. And we didn't really practice long throws, but we had one in the right back position. Gary launched the long throw in, got flicked on. I think it was Andy Gray flicked it on Sharp. He got on the end of it. 1-1, and then about 5-6 minutes later, exactly the same, but it was the other way round, I think. Yeah. Andy flicked it on, Sharp, he scored, and he just the whole atmosphere had changed. It was unbelievable. And then it was end to end. There was a few close. They had a chance, we had a chance, and then I got the ball in the left back position. I was waiting for Andy Gray to make a run, and there's 55,000 people shouting "man on," so I know there's a man on. But I'm waiting anyway, so I held on to it. Andy made the run, played it into him. He reversed it into Trevor Steven's path. Great finish, great goal, and he just game, set, and match. But it was just like the roof come off Goodison. Anybody that was there that night, they always say the same thing: the best atmosphere ever. So it was a privilege to be involved in that game on that special occasion.
We've mentioned the physicality, Dave, already there. We'll come on to that in a while with Kevin Ratcliffe as well. But I noticed watching the footage from the time, the Bayern subs are having a bit of a ding-dong with the fans in the paddock there, and the police are involved. Have you mentioned already your mate's dad there? I mean, that older generation had been through the Second World War. It was an element to it, but to be fair, Bayern seemed to give as good as they got, really.
Oh, yeah, we're talking like the 1980s when football grounds were different. And it was, football grounds were intimidating places to go. I mean, Gav will remember going to away matches in the late 70s, early 80s, and there were some grounds, it was horrible, so you just knew you were going to be, well, in danger. Going to them. And the players themselves, obviously they're on the pitch, they're protected, but, as soon as you go near the touchline, they're getting, sort of abused, they're getting told, in no uncertain terms that they're not welcome there. So you can imagine the kind of flack that the other Germans were taking. And to be fair, Howard famously referenced it himself when... The Bayern coach, towards the end of the game, turned to the Everton dugout and just screamed at him because it was so physical, because it was so, sort of uncompromising. "This is not football, Mr. Kendall. You are crazy men." Yeah. And Howard's response was... It was blunt, should we say?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth adding here, by the way, Uzo Lattek, who was the Bayern coach, is one of the best coaches of his generation. I mean, I think he's the only coach to win all the 3 major European trophies at the time. Yeah. And he'd won the European Cup with Bayern 11 years before, so he wasn't sort of some greenhorn manager who'd not seen anything. He'd seen it all in football. That's it, He wouldn't have been intimidated. He'd won European trophies with big clubs. So I think that there's a little bit like over the years that they were just like minion, inexperienced. There was a lot of big characters. Uli Hoeneß, who played for Bayern, who later became a big cheese in German football. He was on the bench as I think it was a trainer or advisor. So they were known mugs to Bayern. The bench, did we paint him as that, don't we? Some sort of.
Did they try to intimidate Everton physically?
Yeah. Oh, they did. Yeah.
Peter Reid's a famous sock.
We'll come on to that.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. There were no mugs. I mean, we criticism after the game from a few people. Patrick Barkley was quite Barkley was quite critical of Graeme in particular, and we took criticism for our style of play. But the general consensus was Bayern were just as bad, really, because it was in the mid 80s was certainly not as bad as what it was in the 70s, or not as bad as the 60s. But it was on occasion it was kill or be killed, wasn't it? Really, I think. And you saw that on the Bayern Munich game. It's a classic example. That game could not be played now, but I'd say also at the time that wasn't necessarily a typical game. I think because the stakes were that high, it was a lot more physical than what you would normally expect, even in the mid-80s.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we talked about the physicality, and just excuse us because this is from our pilot episode, as it were, on Goodison Park, my home, and Kevin Ratcliffe down the pub. But Rat says it was Everton's superior conditioning that proved crucial on the night.
That was World War III. Yeah. My fire, it was like blood and thunder. Yeah. And if you see footage of it, some of the football that was played, on the pitch, you're thinking, gee, that's, it's, and we knew it was our final. Yeah. You win this, you've got a good chance of winning. Yeah. Only a minor sort of disaster of maybe sort of 7 or 8 of you having a bad off day against Rapid Vienna would maybe ruin it. And maybe the game might have been too big, but there was no game too big for us at that moment in time. The bigger the game, the bigger we rose to things. Mainly because of the unity that we had with us all. Yeah. That was the bonding, that we bonded together. The team spirit that we had was just like I've never experienced it. Yeah. I think when we go out now, people look at us and see why we won things. Yeah, 35 years on. Just being in our company for 5 minutes, the way that we speak to each other. Yeah. Very rarely do we pat each other on the back. Okay, yeah. It's always detrimental. Yeah. And if we're seeing games and footage of games, it's always a black spot in the game that he'll pick up on. Really? Yeah. But that spurred you on to win. Yeah, but it also keeps that bond together because you're like on your toes. Yeah. You can't say anything wrong in front of them bunch of lads. Because you get picked up straight away.
They were a team who played hard and worked hard, but they were in top shape, and he actually goes on later on in there, Kevin, to say that Did Bayern just couldn't live with them, he felt, from a physical point of view?
Yeah, the level of intensity that team produced for 3.5, nearly 4 months was astonishing. We got beat by Chelsea in a mad game just Saturday before Christmas, 4-3 at Goodison, which was a real sort of unusual game. And then didn't lose a match until we'd qualified for the European Cup Winners' Cup final. We'd won the league. We'd got to the FA Cup final. And it wasn't just the odd draw. There's only 3 or 4 draws in that spell. The majority were victories. They just produced this incredible level of consistency and intensity with the same group of players. I know, belatedly, Alan Harper came in for a couple of games, as did Ian Atkins, but largely it was the same, 11 players, week after week after week, 3 or 4 days after Sam. Just astonishing. Different podcast altogether. Me and Gav have had this argument many times about what was best, 84, 85 or 86, 87. For me, that 84, 85 season is untouchable for the reasons just explained. For 3 or 4 months, they just couldn't be beaten. They would just refused to be beaten. And much of that is down to mentality, as it was the quality of football they produced and the physicality as well. But, you talk about the bond those players had, and the bond that we've got with those players as well as supporters. I love every one of those players because of what they produced, so that season. It was incredible, absolutely incredible.
24 wins and 4 draws, wasn't it, from the Chelsea game? We got lost with the Saturday.
Knew I could rely on that.
A couple of them draws we should have won. One was Kevin Sheedy missed the penalty at Old Trafford, remember, right near the end. Band of brothers, that's what Alex Ferguson was there, wasn't he, with Jock Stein? He'd flown down from Glasgow for the Bayern Munich game, and he said there was what's in a Glaswegian band of brothers, and you would have, both Ferguson and Stein would have, Stein, for me the greatest British manager of all time, would have really appreciated that type of teamwork and camaraderie. But it was a lot more than that, than just tenacity and resilience.
Quality.
They had quality. They when it was needed. There's only one. On the night that only required one bit of quality, Kevin Sheedy alludes to it there. It was Kevin Sheedy held on the ball for as long as possible at 2-1, waiting for Andy Gray to make his move, and that was the one bit of skill and quality on the evening, and it came in exactly the right time, and that's what the great teams do. That's what the great players do, and that was quite telling. That third goal, that just when it was needed, because at 2-1 they score, you're out. I know it's different now, because the away goals rule has gone, but there's we say in a half time, we need to score 2 here, but that's assuming they don't score. So at 2-1, it's still sort of level, as it were, because 1 goal, you're out. And so that third goal, he just waited and waited and waited for as long as possible, Sheeds, and then just hits the right ball at the right time. And that was a great goal. And Trevor scored, and it was a great finish from a player who'd missed himself. He'd had a poor evening, Sir Trevor, hadn't he?
Yeah, we'll come on to that one, but I just want to get this one. We've mentioned already about latex complaints from Mr. Kendall. This is not football, but as we said, in the brutality stakes, Bayern gave as good as it got, and it was one of the meaty challenges that got Peter Reid to miss out on the post-match celebrations, which he claims was one of the biggest regrets of his career when he spoke to us.
The atmosphere at the Grand Old Lady, Goodison Park, that night was... I've seen some atmospheres, played some atmospheres, been to games. Obviously, the relegation is not good, but the atmospheres have been brilliant. But that night was euphoric because it was a semi-final in the European trophy that the club hadn't been to, and it was just electric. From like 6 o'clock. There wasn't as much hospitality at Goodison back in the day, so they were all there in the specs. The St. Luke's was chocker. The roof of that church was unbelievable. It was just incredible. It was like something that you could. I was going to say you could feel it, you could eat it. Honest to God, it was like when you mentioned Derek, when you come up the steps, and that was some noise that night. It was game on air, and it was a tough game. And like I said, it was energetic. It was physical. Who was that? Oh, Kogler. They had a little number winger. He was quick, and I remember going to Rat to say, "You got to sort him out. He's causing us." Oh Christ! neck I hit him. Honestly, God, it was, he'd be in jail now. It was, I've forgotten how. Even I winced. I went, Christ.
Yeah.
But he took a wind out of his sails. But the crowd again there was, Howard's quote at half time was brilliant. You know, get it in the park and they'll suck it in.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And be fair, as good as they were technically, it was attacking, what would I call it? Aggressive football.
Yeah.
From both sides, but we had a little bit more on the night.
Yeah, because that's what they say, the famous quote, isn't it? Mr. Kendall,
Yeah,
this isn't
yeah,
football.
yeah.
But they I keep doing this as Peter goes for a sip. They gave as good as they got, though, didn't they, to be fair?
Oh, he done me. Well, I think his name was Dremler. He done me just before half time. He had 6 stitches in me shin here at half time. And I'm just listening to what Howard says, and it was hard work, but you don't feel pain.
Yeah.
When you're playing the game like that, you don't feel pain. The only pain I had was when I come off, and it was, honest to God, it was brilliant. The atmosphere, it was brilliant. The lads are like that, straight in the Conti, down the Continental, and I'm thinking, get in there. So the gaffer pulls me with John Clinkard. You're going to Lord's, the hospital. Me leg, me shin. I says, I'm not. He says, you are. He got a police escort to put me in the ambulance with me kit on.
Okay.
Because I wasn't having it. I says, I'm out with the lads. And I was in a hospital bed while they were getting, well, whatever.
Yeah.
The biggest regret in my football career.
Yeah.
I missed that night out.
Wow.
And then I didn't hear the last of it when I got back in 2 days later. They battered me.
Battered on and off the pitch, it was seen Peter Reid, but just the night itself, Dave, you mentioned, I was looking at some of the things that I could see that I've wrote down and stuff like that. The officials of green collars, just noticed on that. I don't know if you spotted that one, Gav, watching it back. I don't know what that was to do. The half and half Everton and Celtic hats. Well, a lot of them back then.
That was a thing in the mid 80s about the links between Everton and Celtic and Liverpool and Rangers and stuff. It was just allegedly down to the religious backgrounds of the clubs, but I think it was a bit more than that. You know?
Yeah, and the ads around the ground, because obviously we're going to come on to Trevor Steven and the Jägermeister, and he hits the stag, but there was quite a lot of the German ads all around the ground.
It was German television. A couple of things. I think Reid, I don't know that it's the challenge he was talking about. He got done by Søren Lerby, didn't he? He was a Danish one. He had a bit of a argument with him on the pitch, and now at the side to sign Søren Lerby on the Bayern players in 1981 when he was at Ajax. And Søren Lerby at the time was in a relationship with a Dutch actress and wouldn't come to Merseyside. Reid and stuff. What you would like it. I think he had bigger attraction in Holland, but it was because it was filmed live by German television. Because I know that because I had a copy of the video. My mate, there's a bit of a story that my mate had a lad. There was still people. Still in the army in Germany at the time, it was the mid-80s. My mate was in the army, and he big blown. He taped on German television, and sometime in the late 80s, he brought the tape over. And my mate lent it to me, and there was a couple of things when I watched it, and the coverage is there was a camera at the park end that you see fleetingly on our coverage. Okay, but on the German television coverage, they showed the Everton goals. Right. The second half goals from the camera at the park from the other end of the pitch. I mean, so it was quite a rare thing. I think this night, you might give it to me. We finished work late one. We went drinking down Waverty High Street, and be in the coffee house, and then we went to the other pub, which may have been open slightly later than what it should have been. Then I realised I'd left the tape in the coffee house.
Oh no!
Yeah. So I ran out the pub. The coffee house had shut. Let us in. Someone answered the door. I think it was just cleared up. It just pegged upstairs where he'd been sitting, and it'd fallen down the back of the.
Still there. It
was still there. So I managed to rescue it. And I think if I'd have lost it, I would have been in it. This would be before DVDs and YouTube, but these are hugely prized assets, especially the German tape of the Bayern Munich.
I've lost my video from the continent.
And I think it would have taken a lot of explaining. So that was a close shave. But Howard did signed Søren Lerby. Reid had this little altercation bit with
there we go.
At the same time, he signed Johnny Method at the same time. Okay. Yeah, strange.
Yeah, Dave, that, as we said already, because of the away goals rule, it was still on a knife edge. So just an amazing moment of release when Trevor scores that clincher.
It is. It's one of the great Everton goals. I mean, it's a personal viewpoint, this, but I've always thought Kevin Sheedy is one of the most underappreciated legends in Everton's history.
Yeah.
And he is a legend, so 97 goals from midfield. Not all were free kicks and penalties, by the way, either. Yeah. Just, if you look at the era he played in, probably at least 50% of the goals were either him scoring or assisting. Yeah. He was involved in so many of Everton's goals. He'd done something similar against Telford, only like about a month previously, where he held it, and then finally released Trevor Steven, who scored with an absolutely laser-guided left-footed shot in that game into the top corner. But it was just like the quality, as Gav mentioned before, there was like not many moments of quality in that game, but that was one of them. And he just waited, and he he was holding on to the ball, he was under intense pressure, but he just wanted the moment to be absolutely right. And Andy Gray was a traditional centre forward. He was a battering ram. He wasn't somebody that ran the channels, but he did on that occasion, made a great run. And as Trevor said, so in the podcast you did with him recently, he just made a perfect run, absolutely perfect run. And that was the time of the year as well where people were starting to appreciate just how good Trevor Steven was. He'd already scored that wonderful goal at Spurs, which was effectively a title decider. Went round Ray Clemens to score, and then so did it again that night. So it was just a great quality moment. It's a team that could do everything. They could battle and they could play.
Yeah, I think Dave's right about Sheedy. I think I've said before. I think when you're into. If every Everton player had their own video of their Everton highlights, then Kevin Sheedy's would be the best by a country mile. Not only great goals, but like great assists and stuff. It's just like highlights. And it's funny, isn't it? Like, I think there's a couple of telling things when Howard went to Bilbao in '87. He was talking about you can only sign Basque players. Obviously, Howard knew this, and he said, "Well, it won't be a problem. I'll try and get Kevin Sheedy to become Basque." And it's funny out of all the players he could say in the team, he said Sheedy's name because I think he just saw him like when he's not playing. And if you've seen the games he played that season, 84-85, there's a difference when Sheedy's not playing to when he is. That the whole shape of the team changes. Not only the shape of the team, but like the fact that we're then missing his flair from left hand side of the midfield and what he could do with the ball. And I think he was like, I think he was underappreciated, but he was a tremendous player. I think Howard didn't play him, did he, in Germany? And I think there was time. I think Sheedy had a few injury problems, and I think Howard said that he was the one player, bring him back. If he's injured, he'd bring him back into the team quicker than what he would have brought other players. And he didn't play him in Germany, and didn't play Andy Gray in Germany. And I think Gray, he played all the league games in the round game, the away match against Bayern. I think Howard kept him out the team. So it's just to keep Andy for the home leg, so they couldn't see Andy away from home. And also it would brown Andy off, knowing that he's not playing, and so when he comes to the home, like, he's going to be really up for it. Not that Andy would have a problem doing that. And he's worth talking about, isn't he, Andy, in that game? He of all the players we've had, and then even talking about other players, nobody had the ability to bend and shape a game to his own will. That's what Andy did. He just shaped events to his own will, didn't he? He did the same in the Watford Cup final, didn't he? Yeah. But he made that cross that was going nothing into a goal, going nowhere into a goal. I was a nothing. And that Bayern second half, it's Andy, bending the game to his own will, isn't he? He's involved in all three goals. He scores one. And I think some of it is the fact that he's not played him in Germany. I think he winds him up a little bit.
For me, Andy was the catalyst for that era. So he came in as the experienced player who'd won things previously. You talk about big games. He won a cup final for Wolves. He'd got Villa to cup finals, and he'd been the young player of the year, the player of the year. So a great footballer. So he was like not the elder statesman. That's unfair, but he was the experienced footballer that basically gave those youngsters confidence. You look at the goals Everton scored in that era, and the first person across to congratulate them every time is Andy Gray, pointing at them, so bigging the players up. He taught Graeme Sharp so much at Belfield training pitches about how to leap early, how to disrupt centre-halves. Alan Hansen always said the Sharpie was the player that gave him the most problems as a centre-half because of his ability in the air and what he could do on the floor. And Andy helped them so much in that. But some players are just made for the big stage. I don't know what it is. The very, very best players produce when it matters, and throughout his career, Andy did that. This is a European semi-final. He also scored in a European final. So at Leicester, he hadn't scored for like about 2 months, hadn't he? And he scored 2 absolutely decisive goals that got us to almost to the brink of the league title. At the Spurs game you mentioned, he scored an absolute stunner in the opening game of that one. The cup final games, but when it mattered, Andy delivered. And it absolutely mattered that night. And you knew he was going to deliver, and he did.
Scored the League Cup final winner for Wolves, didn't he, in 1980? Yeah, and he's one person that he'd won on the pitch. If Andy doesn't play that night, it's a different game. To be fair, and he his record 22 goals, I think, in 68 games doesn't really. They say about stats in football. That is one thing. It is one. It just doesn't tell the story. Always big goals, and it's what he made other players do, Andy. And I think the Bayern night, though some people were critical, as I say, about his general attitude during the game, for want of a better phrase.
Do you remember his post-match interview with Elton in the tunnel? And he's desperate to go away and celebrate. And he's like giving snappy answers, and he's trying to get away, and Elton's keeping him. He goes, "Have you had enough now, Elton? Let me go and celebrate." And he did, and he charged down the
he would, to be fair, if even when we played the Spurs, Martin Tyler did the piece before and after the game, didn't he? And if you were the press or media, the one person you want to speak to out the team's Andy Gray. Because Andy was he'd already done stuff in the media World Cups in 78 and 82 as a young man, because he could talk well about the game, and he was infectious and enthusiastic, the type of things you like on television. And so if invariably then those big games, he's the person speaking afterwards, because that's who the media wanted to speak to. He was great.
In terms of our clips, then, fittingly we leave the last word to Trevor Steven, and speaking about his clinching third goal.
That 0-0 was massive. Then it brought us to Goodison Park on a night we'd never experienced before. Coming out, I think it was the George Hotel or something we were staying in. Is it St George's or the George Hotel in the middle of town? Getting on the bus there, and it was fans from there all the way up to Goodison, people walking to the game, and the bus had to go slowly because of the traffic and because of the amount of people that were wishing us well on the way to this momentous evening. And of course the atmosphere was you couldn't hear yourself think. And it was going to be a tough game, and I found it tough to get into it. I really did, because it wasn't one of those games where you had any time whatsoever. It was really sort of face-to-face combat all over the field. And we had the players to deal with that. It's not my game, really, so I did, again, what I could, but I got my opportunity, got my moment. And it was just a karma, wasn't it? It was just everybody could breathe again, because the tension was so much. We'd come back from 1-0 down and got the 2 goals from Gary Stevens' throw-ins. And momentum changed. We're kicking in towards the Gwladys Street, and Howard told us that the Gwladys Street will suck the ball into the net, and they did. They helped us, particularly with those 2 first goals. But that third goal, when I had the chance to, run towards the Gwladys Street in space, which was quickly getting smaller and smaller and smaller as the big yellow shirted keeper comes out, and the defenders coming across. And I knew it was one of those split-second things that I just pushed the ball a little bit to the right just to draw the keeper to the left-hand side slightly, and then just find the bottom corner. But I couldn't have hit it any sweeter. No. I really couldn't have hit it any sweeter, and it's split-second stuff. It could have gone anywhere, I'll be honest with you, right? But it went perfectly where I was hoping that it would. And I'll forever remember the Jägermeister banner right behind it, where the ball hits the net, So I've had a couple of Jägermeister on. Here's to you on the back of that goal, and honestly, it was never matched by anything that I ever did. I played a World Cup semi-final, but that was different. This was just something that we'd worked towards over the season and over the previous season, and it was a culmination of everything, all the daily training sessions we'd put in, all the things that we'd gone through. That moment was incredible, and to share it with the fans on that night, and the way that it played out, it could never be repeated. And it was just the semi-final.
Yeah.
But it was more than the semi-final. It was the final before the final, wasn't it?
Never matched, Dave. I mean, that's what we're talking about, aren't we, 40 years on?
I think Trevor sums it up far more articulately than either of us can. It was just the culmination of so much that we built up to for, sort of 12, 18 months. A moment of absolute quality after an incredibly intense evening. And it was, now we can look back on it with the benefit of hindsight, and as we did soon afterwards when we'd won the final, it swiftly became, the greatest night. And it's so much so that 2 years later, I think we played Bayern again when the Football League was celebrating, or the following year, wasn't it? We're celebrating their centenary, and they were looking for a moment to try and commemorate it. And I know, let's have the champions playing against Bayern Munich back at Goodison again. Yeah. And strange enough, we won 3-1 that night as well. And,
less people there, wasn't there?
13,000 there, wasn't there? Yeah. No, I think Trevor's right. I think he also makes the point there is what made it more special is knowing who you're going to be playing in the final. I think it was Rapid Vienna, there was Dynamo Moscow, was it? The semi-final, something like that. This is the game. I know there's been big teams in the competition early on who'd all gone out. These are the last two who can win the trophy of playing in this game. So if you win this one, there's a chance. And I think Kevin Ratcliffe said early on, didn't he, that actually you're going to be doing something bad if you lose to Rapid in the final, and that was how it played out, didn't it? Really, they were really poor compared to Bayern. And so there was that aspect to it as well. If there'd been another two top teams in the other semi-final, I think you'd be great. But there was that after the game, thinking, we've unless we do something stupid, we've got one trophy in the bag here.
Yeah, just to finish then, obviously, as we speak, just the 2 games left at Goodison Park. Does all this nostalgia bring things into perspective for you, David? How do you think you're going to feel?
I still don't know how I'm going to feel. It's weird because the 50th anniversary of my first game at Goodison was only a couple of weeks ago, Easter Monday, 1975. And so I'm thinking half a century I've been going to that stadium as a fan, as a employee. I've had the good fortune to play on the pitch a couple of times. I've been to social events there. My mother-in-law got married there. So many things. It's been such an incredible part of life. And can you develop an emotional attachment to a building, a place? I think you can. So it's going to be strange, but it's the people that make it. And those people are going elsewhere into a wonderful new stadium. So I think we'll get over it fairly quickly. But there will be a real sense of wistfulness, not regret, because you've got to remember the great times that we've had there. And look forward to something very, very special going forward. But it's a wonderful place, and we'll miss it definitely.
Gav, similar?
Possibly not. I think it's all, as Plano says, it's all about people to me and moments and games, really. The actual physically, the stadium itself, it's just a stadium, isn't it? Okay, mate, I know it makes the aesthetics make a great atmosphere and stuff. It's what Dave says, it's the people and the memories. We've all got different memories of that season. I mean, to me, I'd say my best one is when we beat Spurs. It's the best game I've ever been to. Because I wanted to win the league that year. That I wasn't bothered about anything else because I knew the esteem in which Liverpool had been held for all those years of winning. So that wanted to be the best in the league. Anything else was just a bonus on top of that, really. And you take personal memories. I think I've spoken to before, 84, 85. Beat Sheffield United 4-0 in the League Cup at the start of the season. I remember coming off that game thinking, I've never seen an Everton team play like that before in my life.
Newcastle was the game for me.
Newcastle, brilliant. I've never seen. So it's all personal memories. Because as a group of supporters, 50,000, mate, that collectively that's the best memory. But as an individual, we've all got our own separate memories of Goodison and like that season itself. And I've got some great memories, and some of them are, I'd say, more significant than the Bayern Munich game to a degree. But shout out, by the way, for the Fiorentina game in 2008. That didn't end the same way as we would like. But I remember after Arteta scored to make it 2-0 in that game, that's probably the loudest I've ever heard Goodison, at a single moment in time. I was in the press box, and you could literally hear the main stand was shaking. That was another great night. Didn't get the right result, but as heroic failures, it was right up there, wasn't it? Really, but for atmosphere, that was fantastic. The Fiorentina game, by the way, brilliant.
Yeah. So 40 years on, it can't be topped. The great hope has to be that Everton create another night like this down at Bramley Moor Dock at the new stadium, and that's what our Blues are hoping for going forward. So we hope you've enjoyed this.